Welcome everyone to another episode of IT Visionaries, and today we have another episode in our cybersecurity awareness series. We have Jim Alkove. He is the Chief Trust Officer at Salesforce, and we have George Kurtz. He's the CEO and co-founder of CrowdStrike. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having us.
All right out the gate, we want to give you guys a chance in case someone doesn't know who CrowdStrike, and certainly I think everyone knows who Salesforce is, but someone might not. George, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about what is CrowdStrike, what does it do, and then we'll kick it to Jim, and Jim, for sure, tell us what a Chief Trust Officer does. But George, let's kick it off.
Well, I couldn't start this podcast without saying that we're the Salesforce of security, which I've said for a long period of time, and that's to pay homage to Salesforce, of course. And we're a leader in endpoint security protection and visibility, and we've got a Falcon, a platform we call Falcon, which has been deployed in many large organizations all across the globe. And the overall goal for us is to identify and stop breaches. And we've taken, I think, a unique view of doing that, leveraging AI and visibility across endpoints that people never envisioned. So there's a lot more to it, but at a high level, we're focused on stopping breaches. And we do have a small part of our business, which is very strategic, that responds to a lot of the breaches that you read about in the newspapers. So that's CrowdStrike.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into more of that, because endpoint security, as everyone knows, with remote or hybrid work models that are going to be here to stay, more endpoints than ever for you to protect. Jim, tell us a little about Chief Trust Officer at Salesforce. What is your principal role?
So at Salesforce, we're helping our customers succeed by delivering a 360-degree view of their customers, but also with Slack, we're helping them deliver their digital HQ, which really is about how we all succeed from anywhere in this new world. As a Chief Trust Officer for Salesforce, not a lot of companies have Chief Trust Officers. I'm responsible for all of our global information security, but also our global information management and strategy, so data governance. And I'm also responsible for our government cloud. And then finally, I'm part of a council of executives whose job it is to take care of all the many facets of trust. When you think about trust, there's nothing more important in the corporate in modern world today than trust. All companies need to be thinking about trust first, and so we have a group of executives who really manage all of the different facets of trust, from security to ethical and humane use to ethics and integrity to trust and safety. And so I'm part of that key stakeholder group as well.
That's perfect. Now, Jim, we're going to start the conversation, and George, for sure, jump in as soon as you can. One of the things you just mentioned is, of course, the government side of things. And one of the things we've noticed about different cloud security companies or security companies in general, cybersecurity companies that have joined the show, is they talked about the rise of the sophistication of the people that are making the attacks. What used to be thought of as just a group of rogue people sitting in a basement somewhere is now actual government entities that are taking on sophisticated breaches or attempts. What do you see is happening? Because the news would have us believe that the level of sophistication just keeps increasing from the bad actors. What are you seeing? Is that the case? Is it happening more often? What do you see out there from the threat level?
So I'm going to let George take a lot of this because he's a deep expert in this space. But I'll say, as someone who leads security at a commercial entity, I think that the really troubling trend that we're seeing is that commercial entities are now being used as part of attacks in the nation state espionage game. And I think that this is where I think we need to reestablish cyber norms across governments, among governments around the world. I think that there needs to be things that are off limits, and this to me is one of them. So I think that with the most recent supply chain attacks that you've seen, I think that's the really troubling trend. I think I'll pass it to George on some of the escalating sophistication because I know he has a great visibility there.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So just to kind of break it down to make it a little bit easier to digest, we look at these adversaries, and we take an adversary view at CrowdStrike into three buckets. First one being nation state, the second one being e-crime, and the third being hacktivism. And if we look at the nation state activities, incredibly sophisticated, a lot of the actors that you would know, and read about, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all have amazing capabilities in this area. And what Jim is referring to is supply chain attacks, where a nation state has the time, they have the money, they have inclination to wait a few years to be able to get into a company, to be patient, to get into source code, to let it build, to wait another year just so nobody realizes there was a change, and then execute something like the sunburst activity that we saw late last year. So incredibly sophisticated and patient and lots of money. But what we're seeing is a lot of those techniques flow down into e-crime. And e-crime used to be a little bit of a spray and pray. You know, Albert, I'd send you an email, you click on it, you get infected, you'd send me 300 Bitcoin, not 300, but $300 worth of Bitcoin to get your stuff, your pictures back, and you'd be off to the races. But now this has really moved to big game hunting, where you want to get into a company and you want to be able to deploy your malware everywhere. But before you do that, you're actually going to steal the data, and you're going to put the data aside. And when you encrypt that computer or computers or network, you're basically going to say, pay us the ransom, right? And if you say, hey, no problem, we've got backups, go away, they basically just take your data and move it to a dump site, and they extort you to not dump your data. So it's a bit of a Hobson's choice right now. And the adversaries have really taken a page out of the sophistication playbook of the nation state actors.
So what does that mean for us or let's start with you guys at the enterprise level. What does that mean in regards to, like, this is something that we've talked with the previous guests about, whether it's investment, education, training, resources, more technical expertise. How do you combat this? Because this isn't going to change. Like you kind of said, a big game hunting. Like this is, you know, when we saw, for example, the Colonial Pipeline, which we talked about earlier in the year, and like their first reaction was to pay. Now, eventually, it caught the people. I read that they caught the people that did that. But Colonial Pipeline, their reaction was to pay. And I think that you mentioned it, George, based on what you said, like the big game hunters here. I think a lot of them know they're going to get paid or they're going to get what they want. So how do you prevent that? I guess that's where we're going to lean into you. Let's talk about the positive side. Like, how do we stop this?
Well, maybe I'll take a shot, and then obviously, Jim is working at scale with a massive company, and there's a lot of things that have to happen, not just in cybersecurity, but when you look at these sort of attacks, I think one of the first things that we try to do is just understand the adversary groups. It's a little bit like going into battle. You know, you wouldn't go into battle not knowing who your adversary was and what their capabilities are. They bringing bazookas or bayonets to the gunfight. And we track over 150 different adversary groups, nation state and e-crime actors, and we understand how they operate and what they target. And on a daily basis, we receive about a trillion signals. These are events that we get from all these endpoints and workloads per day. So to put that in perspective, we receive more signals from all these endpoints than Twitter has tweets in an entire year. With that, we have a pretty good idea of what's happening, right? So when we look at these attacks, a lot of it is getting into a company, exploiting a vulnerability or exploiting a weakness in a human, getting a password, getting onto a system, and then fanning out or laterally moving across the network, and then implementing the ransomware. As an example, we're talking about ransomware. So for us, obviously, it's what we do. Endpoint visibility and protection is really important because it's the last person standing, right? Everyone's gone through the network. They've gone through email. They've hit everything. And the tip of the spear is the endpoint and that workload in the cloud. So you have to have visibility and protection there. And that's not everything, right? There's a lot of things that you want to do, but that certainly is a big point of protection, is to have that visibility and control. And I know Jim has a lot of things that he works on well beyond that.
Yeah, I think that, we talked about the sophisticated nation state actors and supply chain attacks, but when you think about ransomware and a lot of the threats that commercial entities face, a lot of the things that we're facing just require us to remember to nail the basics. It's common things that you need to do really well in order to make sure that you're going to be able to prevent a lot of these incidents. And so things like patching your systems, most of the vulnerabilities being used in ransomware and other things have been disclosed and around for a while. There are not a lot of 0 days being used in ransomware. Things like multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication has been a good idea for a really long time. it's really great to see other, the world really stepping up its game relative to multi-factor authentication. We've asked all of our customers to turn on multi-factor authentication at Salesforce by the end of by the end of January of 2022. So those kinds of things, that basic cybersecurity hygiene, is really, really important. And and I think that then you can get onto some of the really important other controls, like the work that George's team does in securing the endpoints, like the partnership that we have with him.
So we've heard it before in cybersecurity conversations that a lot of times the weakest link is actually the people. And you mentioned right there, multi-factor authentication is like a basic thing that every blocking and tackling, every company should implement this. I'm curious, why is there resistance to this? Because, like I want to think to myself, right? And I'll just use myself, not in the scope of a big company, because Mission's obviously a smaller company. I'm no different from, I think, a lot of workers where I think, multi-factor authentication is annoying, right? Like, let's just say it's annoying, right? But why is it that you think, if that's why is like, I guess, the individual behavior or perception of it so hard to sway? I think we all agree that it's good for us, but I still see a lot of people heavily resistant to this. I know this is part of Jim, like part of something you got to take care of. Why do you think that is? What do you think will sway it?
I think we all know that there are a lot of things that are good for us that are hard for us to do. Eating vegetables is good for us, but it doesn't mean that we do it all the time. And I think that there's a lot of education and culture work that goes behind enabling us to get there. I think the other thing we've got to do is remember that whether it's us as individuals in the consumer space or it's employees in a business or other organization, people really just want to do the right thing and get their jobs done. And so when you introduce friction into the system, nature will find a way to sort of get around the things that you put in place to put security controls on things. And so I think that there are a lot. So multi-factor has historically had a lot of friction associated with it. There was work to set it up, and then there's an extra step every time you sign in. And a lot of companies don't really think about how many times the user signs into something in a day, and it's often way too many. And so I think that there's some great technology coming that's available today and is becoming much more widespread with passwordless and biometrics that really take all the pain actually out of the sign-in process and eliminate passwords altogether. So we get rid of the password altogether, and you get a much more friction-free sign-in experience. So it's a win-win for the human. It gets you a better sign-in experience than even a password, and you get a more secure sign-in experience.
And just to follow on, I think that's right. The more friction you have, the more, particularly developers want to go in a different direction, as we all know. But to be candid, Jim and I remember the old RSA days. You'd have to go find your token. You'd have to go. Yeah. You guys probably remember too, right? You have to punch in 6 numbers, and if you missed the window, you were doing it again, and it was just so annoying. But in today's environment, it literally, the app comes up, you click a checkbox, and you move on. I mean, it really isn't that hard.
So, that's one of the things that's going to continue to happen. You guys both hinted at it we talked about it for the top of the show. So hybrid workforce is here. There's going to be more cloud services. Data is going to more interconnect. There's going to be more opportunities, I guess, gateways or pathways to be breached. How do you guys think of services? How do you guys think of supporting remote workforce or hybrid model workforce, wherever that is? And just think of like in the general landscape, because it does feel like it's going to be increasingly easy to find a weak link, because there's just going to be more options available. It seems that way from an outsider's perspective. How are you thinking about how to simplify this process or making it more secure, George, when you have so many more people, so many more workers are going to be working more? That's just going to create more endpoints than ever. More software is going to be intercompatible. We already know that's happening right now. How do you guys think about making and simplifying that for like someone like Jim, so he can sit there and understand what's happening in his corporation, his ecosystem?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. There's this really cool thing that came out. It's called the cloud, and people decided they would actually use that for security. And I say that a little tongue in cheek, because when I started the company in 2011, it wasn't really fashionable to be delivering endpoint security from the cloud. It was like, wow, that's kind of scary. But, if you look at the pandemic and you look at our customers, and even as a company, we're very remote and cloud first, as you might imagine. It really wasn't a heavy lift for us, because in today's environment, the firewall is pretty much, gone. The corporate network, yeah, it's still there, but when you turn a company inside out and you say you've got 100 or 200,000 remote employees, which is what happened with COVID, there's no firewall internally, right? So you have to look at other mechanisms to be able to protect these endpoints. And even with the firewall, it's been nothing, more than a speed bump on the information superhighway. So I think leveraging the cloud, understanding that each endpoint and workload needs to be protected itself. The endpoint is the new firewall. That's, I think served our customers really well to be able to get visibility, to be able to get control, to be able to protect those no matter where those endpoints are. And it's really, work from anywhere, particularly because we're talking about this remote workforce. We're not going to go back to what we saw before the pandemic. People want to get back into the office and see people because we're humans, but it's going to be some, hybrid version of what we have today. And I think the cloud and all of its benefits, which obviously, we know Salesforce is a pioneer there, is why we've been so successful in protecting these workloads. And I know I'll turn it over to Jim, but in, being able to work and be productive. And we're a Salesforce proud user. And, our folks didn't miss a beat because they were still able to use their system of record, which is Salesforce.
Yeah, I think I'm aligned with George. I think that, just like if we think about digital transformation, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we sort of saw 3 years of digital transformation happen in 3 months. Well, the transition to a world of what security practitioners would call zero trust, this transition that George is talking about where, the endpoint and identity, I think would be the other part of that piece of that I would say are really the new perimeter versus a lot of what we historically have thought about as a network perimeter. That transition was already happening prior to the pandemic, but I think it's accelerated for a huge number of companies. So it's not that, the COVID pandemic and the remote work has really brought on something that's brand new thinking in security. It's that it's accelerated things that were good ideas. And so moving to zero trust, the focus on the endpoint, the focus on identity, we're the right transitions for security. And now I think they're happening at a much accelerated pace, which I think will be great because even as employees come back into the offices, what you want them to do is, you have a corporate network, but you don't want that network to represent any level of trust. What you want that network to do is provide connectivity. The reachability of something shouldn't imply that you should have access to information like historically it has in many corporate networks.
So one of the fascinating things that we've had on the show is we've had people and representatives from, some of the public clouds, AWS, GCP, and they talked about how much of the workloads of the world are in the cloud today. And some of them are forecasting only 20%. Only 20% have moved to the cloud. Yeah, George, you hinted at it before. It's like a decade ago, you guys made the move. And I'm sure a decade ago, a lot of people made the move. Why do you think cloud is not representative? Why do you think that there's still some resistance? Because there has to be. If only 20% of the workloads are in the cloud, that means 80% of people either A, have not made the move, or B, somewhat skeptical, right? Why do you think that is?
In the early days, people would say, wow, the cloud is scary and it's not secure. And, my view is it can be a lot more secure than on-premise technology because you've got, when you look at the big cloud providers, their business is to make sure that things are secure, right? And it's a shared model. So as a customer, you have to make sure that after everything they give you, you turn on the policies and then you actually protect all these workloads and your applications. So it's not just move there and hope for the best. There's effort that has to happen. But I think with the pandemic, we've seen this digital transformation. And I talked to a CIO during the middle of the pandemic and I said, how's your digital transformation going? And he's like, well, we executed our 2-year plan last night. So I think it really accelerated things. And the challenge that you have is there's so many institutionalized legacy systems we see it. They're running Windows XP, Windows 2000, old things that no one wants to break. And there's just kind of this, lack of inertia that people are like, well, we're not going to move it. It works. And I think now with the, rather than lift and shift, it's like, let's figure out the better way to do it and do that in the cloud rather than the old way. And that's really what we're seeing. So early innings for this digital transformation. And, that's why we look at it from a company perspective as a massive opportunity. We protect about 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion workloads per per day that are ephemeral workloads in the cloud. And I think that's just the beginning.
Jim, on your side, when you talk to other team members, what do you think? Why do you think the resistance is there, or why do you think it's not accelerated? George mentioned legacy. I didn't know if you had any other reasons. Was it culture? Was it people? Talent, lack of talent? Like, why is it feels like it should accelerate even faster, but it's moving at the pace it's moving right now?
Well, one, I think it's actually accelerated tremendously over the last 18 months. I think that, from the customers I talk to, their cloud transformations are moving faster than ever. And I think George is right that people are rethinking legacy systems. I do think historically there had been some concern about control. That the transition to cloud means a lack of control. But I think that all of us have come together and helped customers understand that there's a certain amount of the security responsibility for their data that they're sharing, they're delegating to a cloud provider. In our case, Salesforce, to build and run our services with excellence, and we're able to invest at a level that most companies aren't able to invest in that. And then, as George said, there's a shared responsibility. So there are a set of things that customers do have to do, but it does reduce the burden on them versus running everything top to bottom themselves. And I think customers are really starting to see that and thinking about where do they deploy their resources where they'll be differentiated to accelerate their business versus doing things that are really undifferentiated for their business. So over the past 18 months, I've seen a tremendous acceleration. It'd be interesting to in another 6 months to re-baseline those numbers and see where we're at.
We got to get one of the sales reps back on from the public clouds and tell us how much more pipeline has left to go. That'd be fascinating stuff. When it comes to like the next wave of cybersecurity, whether it's at the cloud level, whether it's at the actual employee level, down to the 2FA authentication, biometric scanning, what are some of the technologies you two are personally really excited about seeing, like you think it's going to make life easier for businesses and how much for the people inside the businesses? What are some of the things that you're seeing that you're really excited about? Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm super excited about where we're all going with automation and AI. George mentioned AI earlier and some of the work that his team is doing in that space. And I think that, AI in detection, anomaly detection of things has been sort of the first place where we've seen real artificial intelligence sort of make its way into security. Although I think we've been talking about AI, George, in security for 10 years or something. But the reality is you're really starting to see it actually show up and add value in certain spaces today. But I think the opportunity for us to accelerate the value that AI is bringing to security are tremendous, in more spaces than just, threat detection or anomaly detection, but, things like access management where, today everything is incredibly manual, and implementing least privilege in an enterprise at scale is a really challenging thing for people to do. And artificial intelligence also has a chance to help us really deal with, the constraints that all of us are feeling on the talent, which is that, even though we all have enormous efforts to find new talent, look for talent in new places, train new talent, there's still a significant shortage, and many of us have large numbers of positions still open. In my case, hundreds of positions still available to hire, and I think that artificial intelligence and reducing the number of humans involved in simple tasks would have a tremendous benefit there.
Yeah, and when you look at, I agree with Jim in terms of the automation is a big element, as well as making that kind of AI driven. I think one of the areas that gets us excited is just rethinking data protection. We acquired a company just recently, Secure Circle, that's focused on doing that. And when you think about technologies like DLP, I think they're fundamentally broken. There's a lot of regex rules and just, it's kind of a compliance checkbox. I don't know really what it does. And it's a big mess for a lot of companies to actually administer. But when we think about the cloud and where data lies, it doesn't just lie on the internal network anymore. Most of the data, the critical data is in the cloud somewhere. It's out in any of these SaaS providers. So the ability to identify that data, to protect that data at rest and in transit, and then even if it moves outside of your organization to companies that don't have your agent or network, your technology, it's still protecting. People leave which is a big challenge. And I know, I'm sure Jim can comment on it. People are very mobile. They're coming and going, and making sure that you can protect your intellectual property is one of the highest risk factors on any board's list. And I think there's a way to kind of revolutionize that data protection. It's something we're focused on, but that gets me excited because it's been 20 years of just the same old, same old.
Wait, so the way you describe that, is it like similar to the technology that we have when we buy like songs off iTunes, where it's like, hey, if you copy and send it to somebody, if you don't have your account, it doesn't matter. Like you can't actually read the song.
It's actually very similar. So it's circles of trust, right? So you have a circle of trust within your organization, and then you have different circles that may expand or contract as that data moves, right? Because data is always in motion.
Sure.
And just like if you sent me a song from your iTunes account, it's going to be useless, right? But if you sent it to someone in your family who's part of your family account, it probably works, right? It's a very similar concept.
Oh, I mean, we've had CEOs and CIOs on our show firsthand talk about like the bring your own device is just such a headache. Like they don't know what data's on their personal machines. Like they have to offer it. And this would answer that, or it's part of the solution.
Yeah. And that's what we think, what people want is, and, Jim is the best person to ask because he has to run a lot of this is, they want to be able to understand where the data is, what's critical, and they want to be able to protect it if it's moving outside the organization or if someone leaves. I'm simplifying it, but that's like a big problem right now is people are just moving, taking source code, taking customer list, all kinds of stuff. And without the ability to kind of answer the question, where is that data and is it protected? It leaves people in a precarious position. So that's really what we're trying to solve. It's not going to solve everything out there, but that's like 80-90% of the pain points.
Yeah, there are some big opportunities in DLP. I think that, as George said, the manageability of DLP, has been a struggle for a long time. I think that, I mentioned sort of, access management as part of an opportunity for artificial intelligence. I think all of us, when you get to a large organization, of which there are a lot of large organizations today, being able to ensure that people have access to the information they need to do their job, but they don't have more access than they need is something that's a big challenge. And so, and I don't think that asking humans to make those determinations is going to work. We need systems that will do that automatically for us. And I think that's the opportunity in DLP is to sort of take us from a world where you have to there's a massive uplift of sort of large consulting project to sort of define who should have access to what, and then codify that. And then as it changes, as George points out, things change. Everything's very fluid in terms of people change jobs within the company. It's not just people leaving the company, but even within the company, people changing jobs, and ensuring that once they leave their job, the expectation is they don't have access to the data they don't need to have access to anymore. And so, those things are really core problems that everybody needs to solve. And, if you take a product like Salesforce, there's a rich model inside of the Salesforce system that allows our customers to ensure that only, as employees move around within their organization, they only retain access to the things that they're supposed to have access to. And then as they lose access to their corporate identity, they're going to lose access to their Salesforce information as well.
Listen, I've had to administer that, Jim. There's a lot of checkboxes, no doubt about it. I had to administer my Okta once as our company went from 0 to 200 people, and I thought to myself, this is hard. So I can't imagine what it is so anything. I agree with you. Anything to simplify that process, because how it was done in the past, how we did it, and I'm going to date myself, is like through like these requests, like these service requests, and there's like a person that had to do this. And I'm sure a lot of companies are still in that mode. So if AI gets me there, that's going to be amazing. Curiously, AI is such a big hot topic. Do you see a place where AI is going to be, or actually, it's not even do you see, when will AI be able to just preemptively solve network patches, security breaches? How far away are our systems from being proactive?
I think it's still far away. We're just really in the early innings of being able to protect systems. I mean, a good example is we had to spend a lot of time with customers to prove that the AI wasn't going to block something that it shouldn't block, right? And we're there now. I mean, as an industry we've evolved. when you think about AI is going to, figure out how to patch something and take something offline and reboot it and all, sounds good. But knowing the administrators that I know, these folks are paranoid, right? And you think about the production environments, you take a Salesforce or these big infrastructures. Like, I just think there's going to be a lot of resistance to do this. And you hear these, marketing terms that get thrown around, autonomous. Like, think about it. We barely have Tesla, and I love Tesla. It can barely, drive itself straight, and it goes on the highway. And I'm a huge fan of it, right? But it's still what I'm saying, and I don't mean that's not a derogatory comment, but it's not like a level 5 driving in terms of autonomous. And we're like not there at all in the IT space, right? We're still in the early innings. So when I hear these things, it's kind of like, that's a lot of marketing, but the reality is you got to have some people that really understand. You can automate a lot of it, but at the end of the day, there's still like, I'm still driving the Tesla going like, hey, we should like stop at the light, right? And we should go. And I think that's where we are as an industry. So I'm hoping it advances, but that's my view.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a little bit further away. I agree. There's so much when I think of it, like the amount of decision-making probably that goes into just recognition of things. I don't know how AI gets there in the short term. Jim, how about yourself? Because I know you probably get more pitches than anybody of like, hey, we can do this for you, right?
There are a lot of pitches out there. What I'll say is that I think that, there's the grand vision of artificial intelligence, but there are so many big steps that we can take individually that would dramatically improve the situation that I think are much more attainable. Like the work that's going on threat detection and prevention that George mentioned. I think there's work that we can do in automating using AI to automate a lot of simple operational tasks that humans do today. All of those will take a lot of cost and a lot of mistakes out of the situation. The vast majority of security incidents today are actually caused by intentional, accidental human mistakes. And so, if we can take those mistakes out of the system, we're going to dramatically improve the security posture of the world, without getting to a world where things are completely autonomous. And so, yes, the great autonomous future, I think all of us would like to continue to drive in that direction. But let's remember that there are some big wins that we can make with AI. If you look at NLP and search, and like, there's lots of things where AI has given us a ton of machine vision, where AI has given us a ton of benefit as in the world today. And I think in security, we have opportunities like that. And I think that's where we should be focused. The grand pitch is a good pitch, but ultimately, I take a base hit, when it comes to AI right now.
There you go. And for your, we're coming close to the end of our time, but I'm curious for yourselves, because you guys sit in really awesome, unique positions, obviously overseeing large organizations, which means you, of course, meet tons of people that claim that they can partner or, claim to be able to do things. But I do want to ask you both, what are you really excited? Have you seen a startup recently that you're really excited about, that they threw a pitch out there, like whether it works or not, I don't know, but you're just excited about, like, hey, this is something that if you can figure out, this is going to be really, really groundbreaking, revolutionary, something really exciting. I didn't know if you guys have gotten a chance to encounter any of these types of companies anytime recently. Curious if you could share, like, what are some emerging fields that people are working on that you're just really bullish on?
Yeah, happy to jump in. There's a company called Talent. I actually invested in it, and it's browser-based sort of isolation and security. And one of the things that, probably 10 years ago, there was a company called Bromium, and, had some promise in terms of being able to isolate a lot of these threats. And ultimately, really good folks that were involved in it, but it was just kind of hard to operationalize. And they ultimately sold the company. And I think this browser sort of control where you don't necessarily have to have, a CASB and, from a SASE perspective, you can do a lot within an existing browser like Chrome, because Chrome is open source. So, you can take Chrome and rebuild it from a security perspective and get a lot of visibility and control. And I think that's promise, for remote workers, for the ability, like, hey, I want to control my ability to go to any of these SaaS providers and lock down the data. And I've got remote workers, that or contractors, you can kind of lock it down without a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of friction. So still early days, and we'll see how it pans out. But if it's made easy by using a browser that everybody knows like Chrome, and I think it could have some legs. That's
awesome. How about you, Jim? What have you seen that you're really excited about?
Well, we talked about this accelerating transition to the cloud, and I think one of the things that a lot of enterprises are struggling with is managing the security posture and configuration of the cloud. And so I think there's a lot of really exciting work going on in that space. And there are a number of companies in that space, but there's a particular company called Wiz that's doing some groundbreaking work in that way, in that space that allows you to really get a quick view of the state of your cloud security posture. And I think that, CISOs, people who sit in my chair at various companies, you really need, regardless of how you do it, to think hard about the misconfiguration in the cloud and ensuring that we're working to make sure that we have the right guardrails as we deploy things into the cloud, and that those things don't drift over time.
We just had the CTO of Wiz on. Yeah. That's a really exciting episode. We'll have to introduce you so you guys meet him. He's super fascinating. They talked about how they just fundamentally broke apart the question of what is the actual question we're trying to answer. I think you'd enjoy that episode. But guys, it was awesome having you today on IT Visionaries, talking cybersecurity, talking about the future state of where it's going to go. Before you go, we always like to let our audience get to know you guys a little personally. George, you mentioned Tesla. I also wanted to ask you guys more outside the work questions so our audience get to know you a little better. What's something that you're excited about in your personal lives that maybe we don't know too much about? Because a lot of technologists lean on technologists to tell them what is cool. So think of something outside of the world of business. What is something that you're just really bullish on, something new that you've seen that you're like, hey man, I really hope this works out? Or maybe you already have one and you're saying, hey, this is an awesome gizmo. Jim, we'll start with you. What is something like a personal consumer product you're just pumped by?
Well, this is a tough question. As someone who's a super gadget freak, I think that I'm super excited about sort of the e-health space and what's going on and the evolution of those devices. Obviously, without getting into specific names, I'll say I think that I have a whole bunch of devices in that space, and I think allowing us all to take better care of ourselves. The pandemic has really enabled us to realize how important to us and our employees in the world that taking care of your personal health and well-being is. And I think that technology is really going to play a big role in helping us all remind ourselves what we need to be doing to take care of ourselves. And I think that that's a place that I think we're going to see a big transformation over the next, really just a couple of years.
Heck yeah. George, how about yourself?
Well, kind of get back to Tesla. And I had resisted getting a car for a while. I raced cars. I raced Audis, I raced Mercedes, and, have those cars, and kind of put it on hold to get the Tesla. And I got the Tesla this year, and I'm like, man, I should have got one a lot earlier. It's really cool. And kind of reboots. And I don't know, now I'm trying to actually get the self-driving module, but you have to have a safety score of like 100. And mine, being a race car guy, mine's nowhere near that. So, I think it's really cool that your car just updates and gets new features. And I'm a bit of a sucker because when I have a Model Y, and I've been waiting on a Plaid for a long time. But, when they sent me the update in the app that said you could take half a second off your car, 0 to 60 speed for like $2,000, I couldn't hit the button fast enough. So I think it's a great business model, and I like the car, and it's pretty cool.
I just saw an article that the Y is now sold out for all of 2021.
It's amazing that, it's amazing I got the car, and literally I've been waiting for an S. I think it comes on Monday or something for like almost a year. And you can't get the cars now. It's just crazy, but I like them. They're good. They work. And, I think it's going to be the future.
Yeah, I'm excited about the EV space as well. All these new companies coming. I got a chance to see firsthand the Rivian pickup, right? And I was like, dude, this thing it just feels more. I don't know. To me, it felt more like what I would want, because I'm an outdoors person. I go out there. Like Tesla doesn't feel quite like a car that I want to take on a rocky trail.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, I appreciate you joining us today on IT Visionaries. Thanks for sharing a little bit about, your companies, what you're seeing, what you're predicting for the future. It was awesome hearing your insights here. I'm sure our audience will love it. Thanks again for joining us on IT Visionaries.